In this video, we'll look at several different slash chords and how they can be applied. As we saw in the last video, we can use slash chords as functional chords in diatonic sequences. In this video, we'll continue to explore this concept in a bit more detail. One of the most common uses of slash chords is as dominant chords, using slash chords to describe 5/7 chords with interesting extensions. So let's take a look at a few examples. We'll start with a straightforward 2-5-1 in F major and use it to insert different chord possibilities. Something to think about is that because each of our slash chords are something over 1, we'll need to retain the root note from any chord we're going to sub. So in this case, it's the C from the C7, the 5/7 chord in the sequence. Let's take a look at our first slash chord, which we'll substitute for the 5/7. It's known as flat 2 over 1. And in the context of this 2-5-1, it would be D flat over C. Before we look at how this works and sounds, let's just remind ourselves of the voicing of the original sequence. Here's the original sequence. We can add some voicings to chord 5 and 1, include pointing out the extensions for the 5/7. Let's listen to the whole sequence and bear in mind the voice leading. You can see the voice leading from the 5 chord into the 1 chord here. The smooth voice leading means that the sequence resolves easily. Let's listen once more. With this in mind, let's go back to the slash chord we just inserted. As we've found out over the course of these videos, we can reharmonize a sequence to make it more harmonically interesting. This is where our slash chords could be used. Here's our flat 2 over 1 again, inserted into the 5/7 slot. Let's add the voicings and listen to it. As you remember from the previous video about slash chords, a slash chord is a simpler way of spelling a normal chord. In this instance, D flat over C could replace C sus7 flat 9 flat 13, the fifth mode of the harmonic minor, as it contains all the harmonic information from that chord. The only difference is that this chord has a fourth rather than a major third. The next slash chord we'll look at is flat 7 over 1. This is another way of spelling a sus9 chord. Here's how the voicings and voice leading work and what the chord sounds like when inserted into this sequence. As explained in the earlier sus chord video, we can use sus chords as substitutions within 2-5-1 sequences. Here's how it looks as a sub for both the 2 and the 5 chord. Flat 7 over 1 can be used to replace both the 2-7 and the 5/7 in a major cadence, thus slowing the harmonic rhythm. We looked at this chord in the last video, flat 5 over 1, which could be used to imply the altered dominant chord. Let's check it out with the voicings. Slash chords can replace root chords too. This is more commonly heard in contemporary jazz, but can also be applied in jazz standards to create a more contemporary sound. Let's start by respelling the root chord in this sequence, the F major 9. As a slash chord, it becomes this, and it's now 5 over 1, or C over F. Let's look at the voicings and the sequence. You can see clearly that there's a C major triad in the voicings. This slash chord, while perfectly acceptable, is not used that often. It's much more normal to see major 9 in this scenario, in this case F major 9. 2 over 1 is another very common slash chord and, while strictly speaking it's a Lydian chord, it can be used as a replacement for our root chord due to having the same guide tones, a major third and a major 7. If we were to spell it as a conventional chord, it would be F major 13 sharp 11. In fact, You'll often hear jazz musicians resolve a sequence onto this chord, making use of how descriptive the sharp 11 is. Let's have a look at the voicings and listen to it. Something to note, in this example of our 4-note voicings, 6 has replaced 7. This is due to the sharp 11 being chosen as the extension from our group 2. If you're unclear about this concept, please watch the earlier video on extensions. So to accommodate the 6 in the chord, the name of the chord for this particular voicing would be F6 sharp 11. That said, it would still be the same slash chord, 2/1. 3/1 is one of the most distinctive and modern sounding jazz chords. Used in the context of a root slash chord, it can access harmony from the harmonic major. The harmonic major differs from the standard major scale in that it has a flattened 6th, yet it still retains the major 3rd and major 7th, which means it has the correct guide tones for the sequence. With a bit of creative enharmonic changes, you can see that the scale contains a major triad starting at the 3rd note of the scale, giving us 3/1. Normally you would spell this chord as F major 9, flat 13. Let's look at how the voicings could work and what it sounds like. Now we know we can use slash chords to replace standard chords. Let's have a look at how we can use them in a continuous diatonic sequence. Here's the first 4 bars of I Got Rhythm, also known as rhythm changes. Cadences. The diatonic cadences give us lots of opportunities to re-harmonise the chords. We can add some nice extension choices and more harmonic flavour. Now, let's change these to slash chords. Notice the choice of upper triads to create interesting voice leading between the chords. Here's what it sounds like, still diatonic 2/5/1 language, but with a contemporary edge. In the next videos, we'll move on to explore more contemporary harmony and begin to look at modal jazz.